Greetings. Pitchfork, Chapter 14. First Stop, City Lockup, Part 3. Creel's bail on the current two warrants would total $1 million cash, $500,000 on each warrant. Each warrant was flush with a few assorted heavy-duty charges: kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder on Mrs. Deems, and assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, and witness tampering on the Wickersham case. Once these cases were firmed up, as his carcass sat in a jail cell, he would have plenty of time to think about the deal that Detective Mass and Gavel just outlined for him. Two other detectives assigned to the Wickersham job had been following up on the Deems matter and had been successful in locating Mrs. Deems. They quickly convinced her to cooperate in her ordeal. She reaffirmed her original complaint of being kidnapped and raped, which led credibility to Mr. Wickersham's statement of witnessing that assault. Before detectives actually had first contact with Creel, one of each, the witness who attended Henry Wickersham when he was attacked by Creel, actually was able to provide Detective Mass and Gavel a lead on where they would find the mother of Mr. Creel. He didn't know her current status, but they were lucky. She was found to be in an assisted living facility named the Clover Hills Convalescent Center in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. Upon their arrival, they were informed that an orderly would bring Mrs. Creel to the day room where they would be able to speak to her. When Miss Creel was wheeled into the room, they were both surprised at her appearance. She didn't look anything like they expected. She was nicely dressed. Hair and makeup were working for her age. She looked 70, but was actually in her 90s. She had a warm smile, yet in her eyes you could see that she was completely off guard to see two men in suits and ties there to see her. After their introduction and after the meeting, Mrs. Creel put her hand on Detective Gavel's leg and said, "You know, at first, I thought you two were funeral directors." They all chuckled, but Detective Gavel thought to himself, "In a way, we are." The purpose of this visit was to, as gently as possible, accomplish two things. Number one, inform Mrs. Creel of her son's arrest, and secondly, hopefully, to get her to convince her son to take the deal and cooperate, so she would be able to visit him before her death. Their strategy was to let her know the situation of the missing young woman that they desperately were trying to find since May the 26th of this year, and their belief that her son knew what happened to her. They explained with his cooperation in finding her, his prison time could be served locally, so she would be able to visit him. It was powerful, and it could work. They also informed her that they would of course facilitate the phone calls to her son in this matter. They would have to wait and see. Chapter 15. The Search for Dr. May Breacher's Body. Creel thought about the offer put before him by the district attorney's office. He believed that he was going to be executed once they found Dr. Breacher's body. He knew he made mistakes which were now back to haunt him in that tiny room of interrogation. He was sick and tired of being sick and tired. He did have a love for his mother and did not want her to hear the details of his disgusting, dirty deeds. Once the full confession was painstakingly drug out of Creel, the detectives' bureau came alive. It was abuzz. As much anticipated excitement was in the bureau all around. It spread from cubicle to cubicle, down the elevators to the crime lab, and out into the parking lots where cops and detectives alike were busy coming and going. They all knew about the Breacher case. It was now time to organize prearranged teams of detectives to get their game plans synchronized, saddle up, and hit the ground with meticulous purpose and design, like a well-oiled machine working in concert. Everyone got their assignments and everyone knew their tasks at hand. They also knew the precariousness of the situation. They could be being handed a pail of lies, or they could have just been handed the grim details of a very brutal crime that'll last in the memory in the city of brotherly love for a very long time. 4 teams descended on 2 locations, 2 uniformed city police officers, 1 for each crime scene, 2 city homicide teams of 5 detectives on each team, 6 on each team counting the uniforms, 4 crime scene investigators, 2 on each team. 8 converged on the Headless Horse Carriage Company, located in Old City. 8 swarmed the stable barn at Liberty Park in Old City. Plus, the First Assistant District Attorney O'Reilly went with Detective Gavel at the Carriage Company, and Gene Adamonis, an Assistant District Attorney, went with Detective Massey to the livery stable. 18 personnel in total. According to Creel, he lured Dr. Breacher into the livery stable under the pretense of asking her to look at the mouth of one of the horse being kept at the stable. He claimed that the horse had injured his mouth on the bridle and was being kept in stall number 2. He preyed on the fact that Miss Breacher was, after all, a doctor. And in conversation, while on the tour and before their break, Creel had learned that the good doctor was also an animal lover. Once he learned that she also loved horses, that's all he needed. His evil criminal mind built his horrific crime scheme from there. As May was separated from her friend, Creel sprung his plan into action. Quickly, stealthy, he was a cunning killer with a thirst for sex. May was asked if she would be so kind as to take a look at the injured horse. Without hesitation, she placed Carmella's gelato on the bench and quickly disappeared into the livery stable with Creel. With only a 20-minute break to work with, as May focused on a perfectly healthy mouth of Jangles the horse, Creel, without a sound, picked up a nearby pitchfork without hesitation, thrust the pitchfork deep into the upper back area of the hapless Dr. May Breacher. The blow immediately penetrated her heart. She fell forward onto a bale of hay without a sound of any consequence. Her red rose, which she was given by Creel at the beginning of her tour, was still clutched tightly in her hand. He savagely flipped up her dress, pulled her panties down, and violently raped her dying and dead body. His next plan was to hide her body and return at the end of his shift duties to rape again and get rid of her remains. For now, he had to get back out to the carriage and deceive the inquiry that was bound to commence. The bale of hay which Dr. Breacher's body now draped across was used to stack on top of her lifeless body. After Creel drug her to an unused wooden closet where various tack items were usually stored, leather straps, bridles, and the like, he stuffed her body into the closet and placed a second bale of hay in front of it after locking it with an attached padlock. Her body would be hidden well for now until he returned in a few hours. He reminded himself to wipe his fingerprints off of the lock while completing this deed, and would later realize he forgot to do so. After he thought about it, he realized it didn't matter much anyway. His fingerprints would have a very legitimate reason for being found on the lock, as he utilized the livery stable almost every day. As he exited the livery stable, he was just finishing the cherry gelato that he set aside and was holding for Miss Breacher as she freed up a hand to look at the injured horse. This mindless act turned out to be the key to solving these crimes and finding Dr. Breacher. If Creel had not had his cake and ate it too, or if he would have paid the 25 cents and bought his own gelato, perhaps he would have never gotten caught. Creel made a quick exit from the stable, promptly returning to the carriage, where he now encountered Miss Carmella, frantic and visibly shaken, tears in her eyes, and helpless to the situation. After the initial police inquiry and Mrs. Carmella being comforted by the professor and his wife, Creel waited for a few hours and returned to the livery stable to continue his evil deeds in the wee hours of the morning. And evil they indeed were, acting like a caped troll with pitch-black dead eyes, tall black derby-style hat, tight black rider pants bloused at the sides like a jockey, but black. He wore a black leather vest with high-top black boots and a black-handled brown leather braided rider's crop in his hand. He was short in stature and had a big round protruding beer belly. A frightening sight in the dark of night for sure. Once Miss Breacher was removed from the closet now serving as her tomb, he used the same bloody bale of hay to drape Mrs. Breacher's body over face down in order to further violate and desecrate her remains. When he was finished, he pulled the bale of hay she was resting on over to the double stable doors, and under cover of darkness, he loaded her dead body into the trunk of his waiting car. After erasing the drag marks now prevalent on the barn floor, and with the same pitchfork he used to murder Miss Breacher, he spread some hay from the bale, feeding it to 3 horses, which were bedded at the livery stable, each in their separate stalls. At approximately 3 a.m. on the morning of the 27th of May, Creel arrived back at the Headless Horse Carriage Company using the side alley access. He opened the outdoor street-level cellar doors, which were made of steel, and lowered Mrs. Breacher's body to the cellar floor. There he placed her into a 55-gallon steel drum after placing a partially broken cinder block in the bottom of it. He then emptied a bag of lime on top of her lifeless body and sealed the lid. His plan was to use a hand truck and deliver Mrs. Breacher, now in the 55-gallon drum, to the Delaware River in the days to come. as soon as the heat of the investigation cooled off. Thankfully, that night never came. 2 crime scenes are now being roped off, and teams of homicide detectives, crime scene investigators, district attorneys, and a few high-ranking police officials were on the ground and strategically planning their search for Dr. May Breacher and documenting both crime scenes, known as the primary crime scene, location of where the homicide occurred, and the secondary crime scene, where the body was taken to and located. After both scenes were cordoned off by the crime scene investigators, directed by the lead homicide detective, the first order of the investigation was to assign a uniformed officer to the entrance of each crime scene. This officer's job is to record and document by name, date, and time any authorized police, DA, or other person permitted into the crime scene. He has strict orders to not allow any unauthorized persons to enter the crime scene. The purpose of this document is to have the future ability to subpoena any person who entered the crime scene for court or prosecution purposes. The crime scene investigator will enter the crime scene with the investigating homicide detectives, where evidence collection, still photography, and video of the scene both inside and outside of the premises. The video will include any outside bystanders who gather to observe. This practice can sometimes become helpful to the investigation in various ways. Evidence is marked, measured, documented exactly where it is, what it is before it is collected. Protective measures are taken to prevent any possible loss or contamination of evidence. There is rigid protocol in place which dictates all preservation and collection of evidence procedures. Whether there is an admission to any crimes or not, the investigation, preservation, documentation, and evidence collection will always commence. This practice can corroborate and exonerate. It can be a tremendous tool in a criminal prosecution, as well as a double-edged sword. In this case, it would ensure that Mr. Oliver Creel would never again see the light of day outside tall and stealthy prison walls, which will surround him until he takes his last breath, unless he survives his prison life beyond age 90. All of his dreams and nightmares will bounce off of these walls, right back into his ugly head, for him to ponder and deliberate on for the rest of his breathing days. All of those affected, interested, and involved in this horrific crime wanted the death penalty for Creer. But a deal had to be made with the devil in order to bring this closure and bring Dr. May Breacher home. We all knew that the death penalty would be an extremely hard sell, given Mr. Creel's deformities, his mother's status, his first offense, etc. Fact was, in New Jersey, for instance, just over the bridge from Philadelphia, the last time the death penalty was used was in 1964. A man by the name of Ralph Hudson was the last man who took a final seat in Old Sparky, Trenton State's electric chair. The death penalty was a great tool to offer to take off of the table for critical information in any murder case, especially to use as a bargaining chip to negotiate in exchange for revealing the whereabouts of a missing body. One less tool the police had to work with, in New Jersey anyway. Thank you, Governor Corzine. While Detective Gavel was going through the police academy during the class tour of state prison in Trenton, he volunteered to actually sit in Old Sparky, of course with a keen eye on the switch. He said he wanted to know what that experience felt like for future reference, as he had his eye on one day becoming a homicide investigator. The first crime scene at the livery stable was first to produce an empirical indicator that the possible murder weapon was located. Detective Mass almost immediately observed a few rusted old pitchforks lying about in the stable. Detective Mass saw one sticking approximately halfway into a bale of hay outside of stall number 2. As they approached and carefully looked at it, there was nothing obvious. After carefully documenting it, a crime scene investigator slowly began to remove it while video and photographs were obtained. Very small traces of what appeared to be dried human blood could now be observed on the puncture top areas of the bale of hay, where it was suspected that there had been transfer of possible blood from the pitchfork to the hay. A presumptive test was performed on the scene, which indicated positive for human blood. This was huge. The pitchfork was tagged and bagged for future processing at the PSP, Pennsylvania State Police Forensic Crime Lab in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Chapter 16. If Horses Could Talk. In total, 8 pitchforks were collected, all to be tested. 4 beautiful horses stood as silent witness in their prospective stalls inside the livery table where this brutal crime occurred. A copper pail was noted to be hanging on a nail near stall numbers 2. Inside the pail was a cloth item which appeared to have a flowery pattern. Upon further examination, it was determined to be a balled-up pair of women's underpanties, size small. These would later reveal to contain semen smears from a Caucasian male, blood type O negative, the same as Mr. Oliver Creel. The panties were identified by Dr. Breacher's mother as belonging to her daughter. They were confiscated and marked as evidence. It was suspected that Creel may have intended to keep them as a souvenir. A matching brassiere was found in May's luggage at the inn where they were staying. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. Next, there was a walkie-talkie code that came over the radio from Detective Gavel from the Headless Horse location. Directed to Detective Mass, code 2501-1021. Then the phone number to call Detective Gavel. It was Gavel's notification that a murder victim's dead body had been located. The decomposing dead body of Dr. May Breacher. The body was transported to the medical examiner's office as found, still inside the steel drum, which she was entombed. She was discarded into a steel drum like a heap of trash. The lid was placed back intact, and after all documenting was completed, the container was received by Dr. Claus Siegel, Chief Medical Examiner of the state of Pennsylvania. At the morgue, a full and complete autopsy would be conducted at 9 a.m. the following morning. It would be a grueling process that could not be avoided. Both Detectives Gavel and Detective Mass would attend as the crime lab investigator documented the proceedings and procedures. The parents of Dr. Breacher were promptly notified and made arrangements to fly into Philadelphia that evening and arranged to escort their daughter back to Liverpool, England for burial services once her body was released by the coroner. This whole situation was very sad. This, as you can probably not imagine, was a task no parent should ever go through. My heart actually aches as I write. Notifications are the single most difficult assignment a cop or detective must complete. Soon after radioactivity was intercepted by media via police scanners, which news hounds and the general public alike monitored, a decent contingent of media and public began to congregate at both crime scenes where news cameras began to appear and questions began to emerge. As planned for, First Assistant D.A. O'Reilly gave the very brief news release announcing a press conference would be forthcoming in the very near future and they would be notified of the same. This held the wolves off for now. It was designed to do just that. In situations like this, time is very much needed to identify exactly what is to be released to the media and what is not to be released in order to protect the integrity of the case at hand. It is a very precarious situation. Too much information released can undermine your case. Too little can thwart incoming relevant information from a public witness, etc. Careful information dissemination is essential in any high-profile investigation and in common investigation as well. You learn this well after you screw one up. Hopefully, you'll learn from another's mistake and you don't make it. Like they said during the big one, World War II, loose lips sink ships. And they do. It is a fact, Jack. If you know that a body was transported and dumped from a sky blue color Volkswagen having a duct tape driver's side vent window, unless you want that car to literally disappear off the streets, you hold that information back until your efforts to find it are exhausted. And how about, which you don't know yet, if there's other suspects involved in your case? By giving out too much information, you may find yourself at a loss to ever find the connected individuals to your crime. A painstaking several days were dedicated to both crime scenes, collecting everything thought to be relevant to the case, and then some. Neighborhood canvasses were conducted both day and night to get those who were not at home during the day. Those who noticed anything amiss were brought to the roundhouse for interviews. Others were conducted in the field, on their front step, or at their kitchen table. All of the notes obtained during the canvasses get turned over to the two primary detectives handling the homicide, Detective Gavel and Detective Mass. The information they turn in might need follow-up to conduct from those notes. It's a major show. You cannot let a confession to your murder case cause you to take any shortcuts or to allow you to cease your due diligence. Not if you are one of the best. Remember, defense lawyers and their investigator will be looking for laziness, sloppiness, gaps, incompleteness, things that you should have done that were not, inconsistency, contrary witnesses. Your defendant may recant his statement. He may claim force, promise, or coercion was used to get his statement, Miranda violations, or a not guilty plea. Well, guess what? Now you have to prove each element in court. And if the case is lost because of your screw-up as a detective, something that you did or did not do, or did something that you should not have done, imagine how your reputation deteriorates as you shrink in your chair on the witness stand at the hands of a very skilled ex-homicide state prosecutor, now turned defense attorney with 30 plus years of criminal work on both sides of the ball under his belt. You better not only be good, more importantly, be prepared. All your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Know the truths of the case and don't exaggerate them. Tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. That's the oath. Know your case. Be thorough in your investigation. Detective Gavel spent 11 years doing homicide work, 48 years total on both sides of the ball, 98% solve record in the homicide division, and never lost a single case during his police and private years. He ended his time doing defense work for ex-homicide prosecutors defending wrongfully convicted murder clients. He once was instrumental in having a client released from prison halfway through on a 30-year prison term in which no less than 52 state police members conducted the murder investigation against the client. The problem was they arrested the wrong person. Detective Gavel took them to school. One of many cases he tore up to shreds and threw in their faces because he knew what he was doing and did it well. He thought of it as taking the police to school. If they did a shabby investigation, it would only help them to improve for their next case, but it didn't get them to like Detective Gavel very much. He knew to always investigate, mindful that his investigation would be held to challenge in court by the very best. After a while, when your name is on a case, the challenges become a rarity and turn into guilty pleas. Always be consistent. This confession obtained from the hunchback was highly detailed, which proved to be a roadmap to key elements of the crime. It pinpointed details which can only be known by the killer. In effect, when there is a confession in a murder case and the evidence in the case bears out, and very importantly, proper police procedures and protocol were adhered to during the entire process, it can greatly increase the chances of a plea agreement as opposed to a trial. The single factor that drives the finders of fact in murder cases is usually always the "why did this murder happen" answer. In this case, it was solely for the personal sexual gratification of the degenerated predator. He wanted to rape his victim, and he would not make the mistake of leaving a live witness to his heinous acts of evil. Not this time, not ever again. In a trial, no matter how ironclad the case is, there is always a chance of losing it. There is prosecutorial error, judge error from the bench, juror misconduct, all sorts of nightmarish scenarios. When you're obtaining a confession, be mindful to ask questions which will corroborate the confession. For example, questions like, have you confided in anyone and told them about this murder? If so, who? Then go pay them a visit and corroborate what they were told. If a tool or weapon or bag of cement was used in the crime, ask questions which will provide the origin and the disposition of the item. Document observations made by the defendant during the crime, like, while you were in the home, anything happened that caused you concern? Yes. The UPS guy came and was ringing the bell and knocking on the front door. Or, the dog was carrying on. I went to the fridge and gave him a hot dog. All things that can bolster your case. In short, don't get laser focused on the fact that you're getting a confession that you forget to include the tent poles of the case. Corroboration of your evidence is very important. Those small facts can corroborate the fact that a hot dog was in fact missing, or the time and date that the UPS guy came ringing at the doorbell. All these little things help tighten your case and make it ironclad. Chapter 17, The Autopsy of a Saint. The medical examiner, Claude Siegel, did a complete forensic autopsy on the remains of Dr. Breacher. After the Diener and a crime scene investigator carefully made a video and photographic record of removing the body from the steel 55-gallon drum, which was weighted with a cinder block before and after the extrication. Once the body was prepared and washed and x-rays were completed, all of the clothing was photographed and labeled as evidence, which also would be properly preserved, sent to the state police lab for testing, and stored in the event they were needed as court exhibits. A sex kit was performed, swabs were taken, there appeared to be evidence of sexual assault. Confirmation would be reserved for when the samples taken were examined by a forensic laboratory. The conclusion of the autopsy revealed that the victim was, in fact, sexually assaulted. The injuries were consistent with being inflicted by a 4-pronged pitchfork. The wounds consisted of 4 puncture wounds measuring between 15.24 and 20.32 centimeters. That is between 6 and 8 inches by approximately a ½ inch in diameter. The wounds were delivered from back to front and penetrated the heart. Both lungs and torso were also punctured. The cause of death was listed as pulmonary piercing of the heart and aorta. The manner of death was listed as homicide. For Dr. Lily Mae Breacher, a beautiful person who just wanted to have fun on a guided, haunted Old City's ghost tour, was virtually scared to death. In the weeks following May the 26th, 1975, Creel was cooling his heels in the county lockup as he was available for arraignment. After a pre-sentencing report and arraignment was completed and his guilty plea accepted and read into the record, his plea agreement was in fact accepted. His incarceration would be his undoing. Word quickly spread inside the prison walls that Creel was a rapist and that he killed a young doctor who served in Vietnam, helping soldiers, and almost killed another World War II veteran. He was attacked by a crazed inmate who kicked his eyes out of his head following an argument over a card game during the 1-hour day allotted for the exercise yard. It was December the 25th, Christmas Day, 1975. The inmate who killed Creel had nothing to lose. He was a gang member of a notorious biker gang who called themselves Hell's Angels. He was serving a double life sentence with no possibility of parole. He was not on death row because his lawyers managed to have his 2 crimes merged with a stipulation that he would not be eligible for parole for pleading guilty to both crimes. During that year, Eastern State Prison was located at 2027 Fairmount Street, was where Creel was sent to rot in solitary confinement. The prison closed in the 1970s officially. Creel's body was buried in Potter's Field with no one in attendance except the prison inmate trustees who buried his crazed body. The death penalty had been abolished in June the 29th in 1972. At the time of Creel's conviction, it wasn't believed that he knew that the death penalty had been abolished. When the death penalty was in effect, it was a very effective tool and much feared measure of enforcement. The hunchback would never ride again in another horseless chariot, for the headless horse Chariot Company. He would never kidnap, abduct, rape, and kill again. He was gone forever. But he will never be forgotten for the horrible deeds that he did while he was alive and here on the planet, especially by the loved ones of Dr. May Breacher. May she rest in peace. The Hunchback of Center City was no more. The end. I'm Detective Sergeant First Class Harry Gavel, retired Camden County Prosecutor's Office Homicide Division. The story you just heard was fiction based on true police events. It came out of the mind of Detective Sergeant Harry Gavel. Stay tuned for another episode of a true homicide investigation from the murder capital. See you next time.